The last game at Colt Stadium was not supposed to feel this clean. Not with the Mosquitoes. Not with the team headed for another ninth place finish. Not with the Dodgers, of all people. Home. Baseball history is not a pennant. Sometimes it's one man refusing to blink. The whole undocumented till I reach 100. Today, Astros04. Focus players Bob Bruce, September 27th, 1964. Los Angeles Dodgers at Houston Colt 45s. The final game ever played at Colt Stadium. The final game ever played under the Colt 45's name. And the day Bob Bruce pitched the ballpark shut. What I love about this one is that it does not announce itself loudly. No pennant race, no parade, no famous October glow. It's quieter than that. It's a ballpark closing. It's an era ending. It's a starter being asked to keep going, and then choosing to keep going, and then being rewarded at the exact last possible moment. Houston comes into this day 64-91, already on the way to his second straight ninth place finish. The original manager, Harry Kraft, had been fired a week earlier. Bench coach Lum Harris was finishing out the schedule. The team would close 1964 at 66-96. This was the third and last season for the Colt 45s before the move indoors and the rename to Astros. The Dodgers come in 76-78 and are having a miserable year by their standards. This is the club that had won the World Series in 1963, the club of Alston, Koufax, Drysdale, Wills, Roseboro, and all that muscle memory of competence. But in 1964, they were undone by weak hitting, injuries, and shaky defense. They finished 80-82, 13 games behind St. Louis. So this is not contender versus contender. This is something stranger. It's two disappointed teams, one fading stadium, one excellent pitcher on each side, and one final afternoon where the game finally becomes more beautiful because no one can score. Around the league, the volume is much louder than it was in Houston. The National League was in the middle of one of the great collapses, one of the great chases. Philadelphia had seemed to own the pennant, then began that infamous tailspin. On this same date, the Phillies lost their seventh straight game. The Reds swept the doubleheader from the Mets, and Cincinnati moved into first place, while St. Louis stayed right there in the hunt. A week later, the Cardinals would win the pennant and then beat the Yankees in the World Series. The American League was tight too. The Yankees eventually won the pennant with 99 wins, only one ahead of the White Sox and two ahead of the Orioles. So while Houston and LA were playing an almost private little elegy in Texas, the rest of baseball was shaking with scoreboard anxiety. That contrast matters for the rest of this episode. The sport at large was screaming. This game whispered, and somehow the whisper lasted 12 innings. Lum Harris was a baseball lifer, Alabama born, former pitcher, longtime coach, a man who had been in the game for decades by the time Houston handed him the wheel late in September of 1964. He's not here to launch a new age. He was there to steer the club to the dock. Walter Alston, by contrast, was already one of the giants, quiet, controlled, famously unshowy, the kind of manager who could look almost like a bystander until you checked the history and found pennants everywhere. He would eventually finish with 7 National League pennants and 4 World Series titles, going to the Hall of Fame. Tom Drysdale gets the start for Los Angeles at 18-15 with a 2.19 earned run average. Future Hall of Famer, one of the most intimidating pitchers of his generation, a hard thrower. He owned the plate. He never especially worried about your discomfort, only your failure. A great line about him was that facing Drysdale was like making a date with a dentist. Yeah, that feels about right. Then there's Bob Bruce, a right-hander, Detroit kid, late bloomer, Alma College, signed by the Tigers, Army service, stalled his progress in the late 1950s. Expansion gave him the lane he needed. Houston acquired him in December of 1964, and he put together the best season of his career, 15-9, 2.76 earned run average, 4 shutouts. This day is part of why. This is a funny one. There's not a big parade of Hall of Famers in these starting lineups. What you have instead is Hall of Fame presence at odd angles. Don Drysdale's here. Walter Alston's here. Future Hall of Fame umpire John Conlon is working second base and nearing retirement. And for Houston, a baby Joe Morgan is in the lineup, only his 7th game of the 1964 season and the 15th game of his major league career. That gives the game a nice time-layered feeling. On one side, Drysdale, established, feared, fully formed. On the other, Morgan, not yet the Joe Morgan the world would know. Just a young second baseman getting one of the earliest lines in his own story. There's not much open blood rivalry coming in. These teams are not fighting for the same slice of October, but there is connective tissue all over the place. Houston's early roster was built in part from the expansion draft, and several original Colts had Dodger roots. Bob Aspromonte, who starts a third in this game, came from the Dodger system. Earlier Houston clubs had also drawn Norm Larker, Jim Golden, and Turk Farrell, Los Angeles. So there's that expansion era feeling here. The new club partly assembled from the cast-offs and extras of the old powers. And the Dodgers had mostly owned this matchup. Houston went 6-12 against Los Angeles in 1962, 5-13 1963, and 7-11 in 1964. So by my count, across the first 3 Colt 45 seasons, the Dodgers had taken the series 36-18. That's not a bitter rivalry. That's more like a recurring reminder of the difference between a glamour franchise and a startup, which is exactly why this game hits so well. The Colts do not beat the Dodgers in some loud, sloppy 9-8 mess. They beat them with poise. They beat them with a grown-up baseball game. And yes, I know, when I say complete game shutout, somebody, somewhere hears 12 innings and wants to argue terminology, as if the point is the glossary and not the achievement. Hey, relax. He started the game. He finished the game. Nobody scored. That's a complete game shutout. The box score is not going to arrest us. Bob Bruce is one of those early franchise players who can get flattened into old Colt 45 pitcher till you stop and look. He was born in Detroit in 1933 and grew up in Highland Park in a hard, working-class environment. He did not even take baseball seriously until late in high school. Then he earned a scholarship to Alma College, struck out 19 in a game scouts happened to be attending for somebody else, and suddenly the Tigers are interested. That's a good baseball origin story. Accidental exposure, immediate consequence. He signs with Detroit, climbs fast, then loses crucial development time to Army service, 1957-1958. When he returned, he never quite locked down a big league role with the Tigers. Expansion changed that. Houston got him just before the franchise's first season, and now he had room to be what he had not fully been allowed to become before, a regular starter. He was 6'3", right-handed, durable, not flashy in a celebrity sense, but exactly the kind of pitcher a young team needs if it wants to pretend it belongs. By 1964, he was having the best year of his career. He was not a curiosity. He was good. And on this day, he was better than good. He was absolute. For Bob Bruce, this is the hinge game. Not because it made him famous forever. It did not. But because it saved a season. It could not. Because it stamped him onto franchise memory in permanent ink. He became the first Colt 45's pitcher to reach 15 wins in a season. He threw the final pitch at Colt Stadium, and then, months later, because 1964 established him as the club's most credible choice, he would throw the first regular season game in Astrodome history. This game sits right at the seam between those two images. Bob Bruce closes the old room, then opens the new one. And that's bigger than a single box score. That's a franchise crossing a threshold with the same arm holding the door on both sides. Now, the first thing to say about the box score is this game is not tense because of traffic. It's tense because of no traffic. Through 4 innings, the Dodgers get only 2 singles, both of them erased at second. Through 4, Houston gets nothing at all. Drysdale's not piling up strikeouts early, but he is getting cheap outs, pop-up outs, lazy air outs. One writer noted afterward that 27 batters between the two teams were retired on fly balls, most of them pop-ups. It's one of those games where the afternoon seems to be disappearing in little white arcs. The Dodgers have the first real threat in the 5th. Ron Fairley reaches on an error by Walt Bond. Nate Oliver bunts him over. Bruce uncorks a wild pitch, and suddenly Fairley's at third with 1 out. This is the kind of inning where a weaker pitcher starts talking himself into damage. Bruce does not. Bart Shirley lines out to Jim Wynn, not deep enough to score the run. Then Bruce walks Drysdale, which is dangerous. A little embarrassing, but he gets Dick Tracewski on a grounder to short, force at second, inning over. Big escape. The first major exhale of the day. Houston sits in the bottom half of the 6th. Jerry Grote reaches on an error by Nate Oliver. Al Spangler singles, and that puts men on first and second. 2 on, 1 out. Actual oxygen in the building. But then Bruce strikes out, and Joe Morgan grounds out to short. Drysdale walks off untouched again. At this point, the game starts to feel cursed, in the best way. Neither offense looks strong enough to be trusted with opportunity. The 7th and 8th go by like somebody folding clean laundry. Outs, pop-ups, few strikeouts. No movement. The score remains 0-0, and the whole game starts to lean into that wonderful old baseball question. How long are these two maniacs going to keep doing this? Then the 9th gives us the first true near break. Top of the 9th, Tommy Davis doubles, 2 outs. John Roseborough hits a grounder that Joe Morgan misplays. On paper, it's an error. In reality, it's a little burst of chaos in a day that has denied chaos all day. Tommy Davis tries to score on the play, but Morgan recovers, the throw comes home, and Davis is cut down at the plate. That's the ball game almost ending and then refusing to end. Bottom of the 9th, Bob Bruce leads off with a single. That by itself is beautiful. The pitcher who has thrown 9 scoreless decides he would also like to start the winning rally. After 1 out, Joe Morgan singles 2. First and second, 1 out. Game sitting right there. And then Rusty Staub bounces into a double play. Dead center of the script. The game could have ended in regulation, but baseball decided it wanted extra innings instead. This is the kind of game that confuses people who want history to arrive in neat shapes. Because what exactly are you watching here? A last place team? Not quite. A great performance? Absolutely. A dead ball game? 1964? Sort of. A farewell ceremony that forgot to advertise itself? Also yes. It's one of those afternoons that makes perfect sense only after it's over. The 10th and 11th are mostly held breath. Drysdale gets through 10. Bruce gets through 11. Ron Peronowski takes over for Los Angeles in the 11th. Drysdale's line ends at 10 innings. 3 hits, no runs, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts. It's a masterpiece that receives no reward. By the end of the game, the Dodgers will have gone 23 innings without scoring a run for him across his last 2 starts. That is cruel, even by pitcher standards. Top of the 12th, the Dodgers finally threaten again. Roseborough finally singles with 2 out. Willie Crawford runs for him. Fairley walks. Now Bruce has 2 aboard. The go-ahead run in scoring position, and Colt Stadium 1 inning away from ending on a grim little failure. Nate Oliver grounds to Joe Morgan. Morgan takes it, throws him out. Inning over. That is the last threat the old park ever sees. Bottom of the 12th, Joe Morgan leads off and reaches on an infield error. Joe Morgan leads off and reaches on an infield single when Peronowski fails to cover first. Rusty Staub tried to bunt him over, but Jim Gilliam, now at third, throws to second and gets Morgan 1 out. Walt Bond grounds to Peronowski, but Staub takes second, 2 outs. Bob Aspromonte is intentionally walked. So now it's first and second, 2 outs. Jim Wynn up. And Wynn singles to left. Just fair. Staub scores, Aspromonte to second. Bob Bruce wins 1-0. The game is over after 2 hours and 50 minutes. Bruce has thrown 12 shutout innings. Drysdale masterpiece dies beside it. The final rally, Colt Stadium history, belongs to Houston. Now for Houston, this game meant dignity. It did not rescue the season. It did not change the standings, but it gave the club a proper ending at Colt Stadium and under the Colt 45 name. When people remember old ballparks, they usually remember them as inconveniences, relics, jokes. This one got to end as a stage for a shutout duel and a walk-off single. That is a better obituary than most parks receive. For the Dodgers, it was a distilled 1964 frustration. Drysdale was excellent. The offense gave him nothing. The club left Roseboro and fairly stranded in the 12th and wasted a 0-run performance from one of the best pitchers alive. That's what a bad year looks like for a proud team. Not incompetence every day, but excellence that somehow still loses. Now, what gets under my skin is how easily games like this get filed under trivia because the teams were out of it. As if a 12-inning shutout by one man is in the last game and the entire ballpark is just decorative because there's no pennant attached. That's nonsense. Pressure is not only standings pressure. Sometimes the pressure's memory. Sometimes the pressure's not letting a place die flat. Bob Bruce passed that. Now, I could not find a preserved full post-game presser from accessible sources for this game, so I would not fake one. What we do have is the immediate aftermath, and it's enough. Bruce is credited with his 15th win, the first Colt 45's pitcher ever to hit that number. Drysdale leaves with another hard luck line and still no run support. Afterward, because it was family day, children ran the bases. High school band played. Auld Lang Syne played. And the public address announcer told the fans the team would see them next April in the domed stadium. That's not a presser, it's better. It's the room itself speaking its own closing line. Houston finished 66-96 in ninth place, 27 games behind the eventual champion Cardinals. The bigger thing, though, was not the record. It was the transformation. The Colt 45's identity ended here. In 1965, they became the Astros, moved into the Astrodome. The Dodgers finished 80-82, tied for sixth, 13 games back. For a franchise that had just won the 1963 World Series, it was a hard fall, but it was not the end of the larger Alston-era machine. It was a bad chapter, but not at that franchise. Meanwhile, the broader season turned legendary. St. Louis caught fire and won the pennant, and then beat the Yankees in 7 games in the World Series. So this quiet Houston games sits inside one of the loudest finishes baseball ever produces. Bob Bruce's 1964 earned him one more historic assignment. He started opening day 1965 in the Astrodome and threw the first regular season pitch ever in that building. That alone would have made him a permanent part of regular season Houston baseball lore. But the rest of his career did not keep climbing. 1965, he pitched better than his record suggested, but the Astros gave him almost no run support, and he lost 18 times. In 1966, an eye infection wrecked the season. By the end of that year, Houston traded him to Atlanta in the Eddie Matthews deal. He made it through part of 1967 with the Braves organization. Then, his big league career was done. After baseball, he built a successful life in business, especially real estate, remained connected to franchise history, returning for commemorations in Houston years later. He died in 2017 in Plano, Texas at the age of 83. So when you place him in Astros history, he's not just a useful early starter. He's one of the bridge figures. Tiger cast off to Colt Pillar, last pitch at Colt Stadium, first pitch in the Dome. That is real estate and baseball memory, too. Next time, Joe Morgan. Not the bronze plaque Joe Morgan. Not the fully armed Big Red Machine Joe Morgan. The early Houston version. The little engine version. The one who's still arriving. Still learning how loud his own game can be. He's already here in this story, which I like. He leads off the last rally in Colt Stadium history. He mishandles a grounder in the ninth and then helps erase the damage. He grounds out to end one Houston chance and fields the last Dodger threat to keep the game alive. That's what the beginning often looks like when a great player first shows up. Not dominance yet, but fingerprints everywhere. So, that's Astros04, Bob Bruce, September 27, 1964. A scoreless afternoon stretched to 12, a nearly empty ballpark, a franchise changing names, a city preparing to move indoors, and one pitcher deciding that the last game at Colt Stadium would end the way a pitcher dreams. Complete game shutout. Handshake line, done. That's not a side note. That's a clean ending. And in baseball, clean endings are rare.